So, straight up, my friends, AEW Revolution 2025 was a really, really good show. Now, apologies for how I am talking. I talked about this on Ups and Downs Revolution, which you can check over on What Culture Wrestling right now. I had a wrestling match over the weekend. Somebody needed me right in the face, causing my jaw to lock, because your bodies do weird things, and I bit down so hard on my tongue, it is incredibly swollen, and actually speaking right now is incredibly hard. So you may be like, Simon, why are you doing this? Well, it's my job, and we carry on regardless. And also, if you are a pro wrestling fan and you like what AEW does, well, you should probably be going watch that pay-per-view right now. So I just thought it was super fun for what it was on the night, but I also think it's going to open the door for many things going forward, which we'll get to when we talk about Swerve Strickland. But the opening match kind of summed it up too, right? MJF versus Hangman Adam Page. They are two OG AEW guys, but also they feel like main eventers. So even though they're opening the show here, they still carry that weight with them, and they still feel like a big deal. And of course, you know, whoever wins and whoever loses is going to have massive ramifications. And yes, MJF got defeated, and Hangman Adam Page got the win, and it was essentially shenanigan free. Like, they were still doing some crazy stuff like a tombstone on a chair, which very sadly will not get talked about given the stuff that happened in later matches. But I really hope we kind of lean into everything we were doing with Maxwell during this thing, in the sense that when he did have the up and up, for lack of a better degree, after that move, he started shouting, you know, why do they love you? Why do they not love me? Which I totally understand. It's a daily occurrence. And I suppose you could say that Hangman used that moment of a lack of confidence. He hits the buckshot lariat after a lot of other crazy moves, like that angel's wings. Hopefully I remember to put the right picture up on the screen. That's a real angel's wings. That's what you would do if wrestling wasn't predetermined, and Hangman gets the win. Now I love it, because this was certainly a pick'em. You could argue that MJF should have won. You could argue that Hangman Adam Page should have won. But the fact that Cowboy did get the victory, I now kind of think, given where Swerve is about to be too, before the end of the year, we're probably going to be doing Swerve versus Hangman for the world title, which would be absolutely tremendous based on their feud. And the reason I almost think that it's good that MJF did lose, if you go through his win-loss record, he hasn't lost that much over the last few years. Like, we really pick and choose when he does get defeated, which is what I think we should do. But that's where the intrigue comes from. Or what does he do now? Is he still going to go after Hangman? Does Hangman spin off into the world title picture? Because even though he's not the number one contender, he has just got a massive win. And that's all wrestling needs to be. Like, wins and losses don't matter as long as there's a story there. I think that's what we have to caveat it with when we do talk about that. And as long as the narrative is super interesting and makes you want to tune into the television, we've won, and we've done it right. And MJF is such a good character, he's such a good promo, that hopefully there's a real cool story that's about to unravel. And Hangman Adam Page has lost a lot over the last couple of years, because he can. He's just completely bulletproof, because people love him, which also ties into the story we're telling here. So I just thought it was a fire opener. And in terms of setting the scene and setting the table for what surely we're going to look back on and consider one of the best AEW pay-per-views, at least up to this point, no notes. And it was the same in a similar way when Mercedes Moné defended her title against Momo Wanatambe. I mean, the only difference was that I never thought she was going to lose that championship. And I suppose they were my two negative things on the whole show. It was the same with Brody King versus Okada. And just because it would be nice if you built this stuff up more, I guess Mercedes kind of gets away with it, because she's just going through the division. I'll fight you, I'll fight you. It was kind of a surprise when she had a rematch with Chris Statlander, because she hasn't really been doing that. But in terms of the work, to sound like an absolute nerd, Mercedes Moné is so good. Momo absolutely showed out, and she showed everybody what she can do. Some of this absolutely went awry in terms of stiff kicks and who knows what else. And I also think that Wanatambe landed on her ankle at one point, because I think Mercedes Moné was going to go for the crossbody and they delayed it a little bit. So I hope they are okay, but you've got to put respect on their names for laying it in as hard as they did. I'm sure they had a conversation about that beforehand, and unfortunately sometimes when you do that, things can go awry. But when you, once again, you take the show as a whole, it just holds up its end of the bargain. Again, you didn't expect a title change unless you're a massive Momo fan, and more power to you. And it also just reminds you that Mercedes is on a tear right now, and just having, as Sheamus would say, banger after banger. So I don't think this one will live long in the memory, again, especially compared to what else we did get on this evening. But as a second match on a show, as you get comfy and you put your tush in a chair, I don't see how you can fault it. I thought it was really, really fun. When we do get to that Swerve Strickland versus Ricochet match, which was the number one contendership, so again, it had the stakes, it had a reason to be invested in it. I just think they have great chemistry together. I think they were born to do it. And Ricochet, as this just obnoxious dickhead, for lack of a better term, this is why it's massively important that we do have dueling company, whatever you want to call WWE and AEW, because he wouldn't have had this opportunity sort of a few years ago. I don't want to say he would have been stuck in the WWE system, because you look through Ricochet's WWE career, and I think he had a great one, but he wanted more, he wanted to try new things. and he's flourished here, and Swerve Strickland is just the man. It's why I'm super happy he did win this, because of course now you have to figure out the next AEW pay-per-view, which is only in a few weeks' time, around about a month. You can do John Moxley versus Swerve Strickland, and I don't think Swerve Strickland should be losing that, because of course the Death Rider storyline probably has reached its peak, and a good wrestling promoter can see that. Hopefully Tony Khan is going to do this and just be like, okay, we're going to switch the belt around. Everybody wants Swerve Strickland to win it. It's also must have been in somebody's mind for a while, because Prince Nana has been going, bro, you forgot about that world title. We need to go back after it. And we did everything with the robe here. It was a bit dumb, because at one point Prince Nana could have just got it back, but it's wrestling, right? We have to buy into these tropes. And what I really liked as well is he did get it back, and then Ricochet just went and took it off from him again. There's a really cool hierarchy thing for that, because in real life, I'm sure Prince Nana would have punched him. But because we present Prince Nana as a manager and we present Ricochet as the wrestler, he was allowed to do that. I think it's important. I think that sticks in people's brains or in people's subconsciouses. And then watching Ricochet do moves in the robe was so dumb. We also went WrestleMania here, and everybody was kicking out of everything. But I thought that massively worked, because I actually didn't know who was going to win. Given that Ricochet had beaten Swerve Strickland in the week on Dynamite, I think it was, and getting my shows confused, that kind of tells you that Swerve is probably going to get the win here, as we try and play 50-50 without doing it. But it was just so enjoyable. And the finish of the two house calls, and then Ricochet kicks out. I was like, what? And then he hit the JML driver, right? Big pressure. 1, 2, 3. It was just the right call. Again, it kept up the momentum of the pay-per-view itself. By this point, I was like, man, even if we get a dud, which we didn't as far as I'm concerned, we'll be able to hold up, to say the least. And so, yeah, I mean, it just ties into what I just said. Swerve Strickland should be the AEW World Champion in a couple of months, wherever you want to do it. You can end the Death Rider storyline, but I want to hold that off until we get to the main event. But we have to have plans for Ricochet. He's in a very similar position to MJF. Make sure we line up some opponents. Make sure we keep pushing him. He should be a world champion in the future, because he's just doing so well. I genuinely loved it. I thought it was so much fun. And the last few minutes, especially when Ricochet did the 630, which I'm always impressed with, it was wonderful, wonderful stuff. The DVD on the outside, when Ricochet caught him and they basically dopped him on his head, I think Swerve in the press conference said he blew out his eardrum or something. I don't know whether it was on that move, but genuinely terrifying. So between that and the Angels wings in the first match, just want everyone to be all right. This brings us to Okada versus Brody King for the Continental title, which we've already talked about a little bit. Brody King is just brilliant. The man totally understands his character, and I think AEW does too, because he's always protective. He was getting wrecked here, but he always keeps getting back up, and Okada sold for a lot of this. Now, the reason I think he had no chance is because I'm convinced that All In now, given what happened with Kenny Omega, we're going to do Kenny Omega versus Okada, Continental versus International, and we will merge those championships. Because again, I think Tony Khan is listening, which is why I think this pay-per-view was so damn important. We do have too many championships, and even that crazy new boxing group, I won't talk about that here. But one of the things I do like, the only thing I do like, when people start talking about it, is we're going to have sort of less titles, because they just mean more. That's just a fact of life. You see it all the time. So there was no way Brody King was going to win here if that's the plan, and nor should you. Don't take the belt off Okada before you're going to do something as big as that. But I love the fact that Brody King can continue to get himself into these positions. He loses a lot, but people are still behind him, because that's how good he is. And I talked about this before. I like Okada as a bad guy. I think it shows range, and I also think it allows him to give his body some time off. And of course, he can still pull the go trigger wherever he wants, but there were certain times towards the end of that New Japan run when that man was broken. And he was just, I don't want to say he was existing on fumes, because he was still putting on amazing matches, but to come over to American wrestling, to use that term, you can, I don't want to say get away. We want it. We want more promos. We want more character. And I'm sure he's over the moon that he gets to do it. I just find him very entertaining. And again, he's still an incredible big match wrestler. So I have no problems with it, and we really protected Brody King coming out with all this mad stuff, and obviously Okada was using championships and distracting referees, but that Rainmaker is still the move that's going to get you at the end of the day. And then it kind of sort of ties into the other match that people were, I wasn't moaning about, that's a little bit unfair, but the tag team match, right? The Hurt Business versus the Outrunners. I think if you look at it overall, the Outrunners just got run through, and the Hurt Syndicate's gimmick of we're going to murder your ass continues, and the little hope spots that the Outrunners did get were awesome. They were great when they were throwing them out the ring, and they had the double Predator elbow spot. I was pumping, and I was hoping they were going to win, which is also the point of wrestling. Who are your favorites? Who do you like the most? Just suspend your disbelief. And of course, the build has to tie in. And this was me relying on the fact that, Turbo and Floyd and Magnum and Truth and all these guys, I don't know why I made them 4 people and they're just 2. I just like all of their names, clearly. But because I enjoy them so much, I want to pretend, or maybe we will pull a fast one here, like wrestling does do from time to time, but you knew it was never going to happen. And I understand that there is a assumption or a hope or expectation that when you watch an AEW pay-per-view, it's going to be the, amazing. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Never stop. I don't mind that, because WWE takes their time. So if I am watching an alternative, I want them to do something different. But it doesn't mean you have to get the 5-star match or the attempt at a 5-star match. Hate that I did that with my fingers in every single bout. I think that's lame. I think that's boring. The other shows I usually get a bit tired of halfway through because it all feels the same. This felt like variety. It felt like comedy. Once again, are we going to talk about it after the fact? No. But I love the fact that Outrunners got on a pay-per-view. I think they've earned that right. And I like the fact that we stuck to the idea that we are telling. I think we saw Leo Rush and Action Andretti in the crowd too. They should be run over as well. And ultimately, it probably should lead to the Young Bucks coming back and doing that match, because that's also what I want to see. Matchups that you never thought you'd see. So sure, we can put it to bed now, but it's still a good time. So what am I going to do? The last 4 matches I'm kind of going to squeeze together because I think they kind of tie in. But Toni Storm versus Mariah May in the Hollywood ending magical match. I mean, it has to be a contender for the best feud that AEW's ever done. It's been going on for over a year. They've only had 3 matches, but I think that's okay. I think it makes them feel more special. Again, less is more. I was not prepared for the brutality in this. I was not prepared for glass. I was not prepared for that thing. What's it called? Tenpai fighting, whatever it is. I always get that name wrong. Where you wrap your fist in tape and you put glass on it. I can't imagine how they're feeling today. And I think the absolute highlight was it that they used all these weapons, did all these crazy spots, throwing people off tables, off stages. And yet it was when Toni Storm got the shoe, when the fans like, oh my gosh, she's got a shoe. It's a shoe, man. We wear it on our feet. But wrestling's about moments, and wrestling's about buying into the ridiculous sometimes. And the fact that it ended on a table with, what did it say, Hollywood ending on it, and the Storm 0, 1, 2, 3. I just thought it was excellent. I know some people are like, oh, we should carry this feud on. I disagree. We should come back to it. But now I want to showcase that AEW championship in different ways, show off Toni Storm in different ways, make sure we have programs for Mariah. She certainly enters the MJF Ricochet conversation. What have we got? Let's make sure we keep going with this. But it was great. And then you have to talk about, I mean, Kenny Omega versus Takeshita kind of bookended. This was in the middle, I should say, sorry. But you then have the Will Ospreay versus Carl Fletcher steel cage match, which is everything we just talked about times 2. I cannot believe some of the stuff they did. Did they maybe push it too far and did some of the moves where they shouldn't have been kicking out? Yeah, you can argue that. But I was engrossed the whole time. So sometimes I watch a film plot, I'm like, this is a bit silly, but I can't take my eyes off it, which is what this was. The Spanish fly off the top of the cage will never get the credit it deserves. This is the worst thing I'm ever going to say because, of course, you're allowed your opinion. But I think when you've done wrestling, and I'd like to imagine some people watching this, I'm not saying you ever went to a match, but you did training, you understand how terrifying and scary and the risk of error, but also the technical ability you need to have to pull that off is unbelievable and unreal. And if they're both walking, which they are, they're not human as far as I'm concerned. But I understand some people don't like double juice, as people in the business call it. But I think it kind of was warranted here. And I do think AEW has backed off on that a little bit. Maybe you could argue we could have held one of these matches off, but it didn't bother me. That's not to say that it shouldn't have bothered me. I can be wrong with the things that I'm saying. But Toni Storm, I think, bled the most, with Will Ospreay a close second. But given the nature of the matchups, I wasn't like, I can't believe we've done all this blood here. I was happy we didn't have it in the Kenny match. I was happy we didn't have it in the John Moxley, Adam Copeland match. But then, yeah, in between all that, you have Kenny Omega versus Takeshita, just having one of the best matches you're going to see. We're still focusing on the diverticulitis of Kenny Omega, and he's so good at selling, you start to feel worried for him. I mean, he took a table right on his tum-tum, which was totally nuts. But it's one of these ones as well. It's like the Toni Storm Mariah May match from Grand Slam Australia. The way they use the surprise roll-up, that's how we want to use the surprise roll-up. And while I take the mick of it all the time, because it didn't feel like a crutch. It felt like two guys fighting. Then one won a championship with it. So all of a sudden it does have more importance. But those 3 in a row were just, I mean, if you couldn't hope for 3 better matches back-to-back as far as I'm concerned, given my expectations and given everything we'd seen before that. And how Kenny Omega is still operating like this, given what he goes through, I don't know. And Takeshita has a massive upside. We'll throw him in too. So it's now MJF, Ricochet, Mariah May, and Takeshita, all who need to be included into the mix. You don't need titles, but you should be doing something. And I think giving Kenny Omega this championship is the right thing to do. And that's why I think we should merge them as well, because he's not in the world title picture at the moment. He should be back there one day. But if it is just so congested, which it is, let's look at this championship. Well, how do we make this as big as the world title? So we can headline shows with it. We can make people care. You combine it with the other good title, and you have Kenny Omega have the matches that only Kenny Omega can have. He's a generational talent. He's one of a kind. I don't think there'll never be another like him because he's such a unique individual. So, yeah, all 3 together were amazing. Obviously, Will Ospreay won his match too, so he should now be thinking about the world title, which is also awesome. That list extends. And the controversy is the John Moxley versus Adam Copeland match. John Moxley walking away with the world championship. I would have liked it. Apparently, I'm wrong. I've been told this twice today, so what do I know? I was quite excited when Christian was getting choked out after he cashed in his briefcase, Money in the Bank, whatever we're calling it, and put his hand on Adam Copeland. I would have liked that pin. Maybe I'm too into goofy wrestling. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that in the world title picture. But I just like the idea of John Moxley being dethroned and Christian Cage having it. Ultimately, I think my ideal one would have been Jay White stealing the bit of paper and signing it himself. Maybe we could have established that as a thing. I do think the pay-per-view ended flat, all things considered. I don't think it was as big a deal as other people are saying, because Swerve became Batman and jumped on the balcony and attacked Jon Moxley, telling you we're probably going to stop this Death Riders thing soon, and the guy's going to be Swerve. The guy is going to be Swerve. Adam Copeland doesn't need it. Christian doesn't need it. Jay White, I think, would have not needed it. I think he would have benefited from it. But if we now spin off Adam Copeland versus Christian Cage, I'm still love that feud. And the fact he had that injury and went away for some time, I'm ready for it again. It should end with them being friends or whatever they want to be, but going on the heel or the babyface tag team run. And for that reason, I like it. But I do admit when Christian Cage did pass out, I was a bit like, oh, that's okay. But the good news is we got rid of the contract. Some people hate that contract, so that could be Tony Khan listening to the fans, which is kind of, putting Swerve back in that title picture, which kind of feels like the same. So I think if you take it on all of its merits, the match itself was very good. Jon Moxley is very talented. Adam Copeland is very, very talented, especially for his age and the injuries that he's been through. I just don't necessarily think every single beat of this was what people hoped for. The last 3 weeks, I think it was a lot better. And obviously, Wheeler Yuta realigned himself with Jon Moxley. No big surprise there. Jay White did accidentally hit Adam Copeland because there can be something in that too. Did he really? Did he not really do it? So that's nice. We've set some things up for Dynamite. But I do admit when Jon Moxley went, I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. But we probably should have switched some matches around here too. I think ultimately because the championship was on the line, it's always nice to end with a title, as we did here. I think the women's, you could have been there. I think that would have been fine. And again, some of these matches hit such highs, it almost doesn't matter where they were, but you always want to end on a happier note, and the fans just didn't want this. I think it's a minor criticism. Other people would disagree with me. Please do in the comments. But if I was going to sit down and sort of rank all the pay-per-views since AEW has been born, this one would be right up there for me. I do think there are matches that you can go back and watch over and over again. I do think there's matches that will be talked about forever. And I do think there's matches that now, or sort of a few months' time, will go, oh, that meant this and that meant that, which is only going to justify spending your time on the product, the structure, the foundations, and things that we are doing. I just know by the end of it, I felt totally destroyed. In a good way, I was like, oh my gosh, I've seen a lot. That's what I expect from AEW. And I don't think that's a bad thing. That's why when it does kind of fly through and it's match, I'm like, awesome, WWE is ready to match. Let's chill out, man. Let's chill out. There's probably a happy medium, but we're not going to get that because that's not how 2025 works. Go to the extremes, because then I know I'm watching two different products. And as always, if it's not for you, it's not the end of the world. You do not need to go on the internet and start shouting like a crazy person, unless you're a grifter, of course. You have to make your money. But more importantly, let me know your thoughts about the pay-per-view in the comments below. I'm sorry I'm struggling so much to speak to the point. You can just interact with the video and go click things and buy things. Whatever you want to do, support me. That would be great. But it is, I don't know if it's coming across as hard. I've never struggled this much with speaking in my life. And every time my tooth sort of, grazes this thing, oh my gosh, tears in my eyes. But it's a Golden Up pay-per-view, as I said on Ups and Downs. It's a 5-star, 6.25 star Tokyo Dome pay-per-view. It was an all-timer for me. And the problem is people then go, it wasn't better than WrestleMania. I'm not comparing it to WrestleMania. I don't expect my WWE to be like AEW or vice versa. I expect them to offer me what they have proven they're going to offer me over the last couple of years, let's say post-pandemic. And if you want to talk about the last 10 days, the Elimination Chamber would be right up there. That's what I want from WWE. And this is what I want from AEW. And that's why I think we're living in the good times right now, because there is something for everybody, and that's never going to be a bad thing. I should stop talking now for obvious reasons. But thank you for joining me as always. I am back from my break now, so it's business as usual. Again, interact as much as possible. I'll see you tomorrow.